Steph.
Hey, Prasid. Hey, Soham. How are you?
Very well. Very well.
It's a beautiful night here in New York.
Where?
In New York.
In New York. It's late, 10 o'clock there.
Yeah.
Folks, welcome in. It's 7 on the dot. Pacific, 10 New York, or rather East, and probably some or the other time in most time zones of the world. Let's see, we'll just get started in a minute. Let's see. Let's see. Jake's here. Welcome, Jake.
Hey, guys.
Welcome. All right.
So do you all your meetings outside now? I feel like I always hear birds in the background.
Birds as the background, yeah. Yes. Birds are good. All right, folks, let's get going. It's 7:01. Again, my name is Soham. We meet every Thursday night to talk about something or the other. And I have Prasid with me up on stage, Steph, Jake. Today, we are going to talk about starting companies, becoming a founder from big tech especially. And the question is interesting because big tech, it is very difficult to leave big tech and start companies. So we'll just discuss that a little bit in detail, understand some experiences, and hopefully not come to a conclusion, but or we might. I think everybody will have a different conclusion, but it should be very interesting to talk. Let's see. Let's introduce Jake. Jake, do you mind? Would you mind introducing yourself real quick?
Yeah, sure. So, hey, everyone. My name is Jake Spraker. Most recently in my career, I guess in the pre-startup life, I worked as a software engineer at Apple for 5 years in our internal tools division. So I got to work on some cool projects at the intersection of machine learning and software testing. I got to do some general full stack development, and I also got to work on a culture change initiative around software quality, which was really cool. But I've always been inspired by which I did pretty recently. I quit my job, did a fun road trip across the country with my girlfriend, and now I'm on the startup journey, which has already taken some interesting turns. But yeah, I guess that's something we could get into later. So yeah, it's a little bit about me.
Awesome, Jake. Awesome. So you just got started. That's pretty cool. Let's see. Prasid, do you want to introduce yourself real quick?
Yeah. So I started my career at Microsoft in marketing, was there about 4 years, worked on some really interesting things, worked on what eventually became, the web versions of Office, worked on, this part's depressing, worked on the Zune. And worked on a lot of projects related to kind of the kind of college student and K through 12 education audience, and then moved down to Silicon Valley and have worked for about 8 startups since. Never as a co-founder, but a lot of the time very early stage. So sort of like founding of the department.
Wonderful. Welcome, Steph, as well. Steph, I know you run all ops at IK, and you guys also got started recently, right? But not in tech, I'm guessing. Steph, you're on mute if you're speaking anything.
Hey, Soham. Sorry, just got off the phone from Pradeep. I apologize about that. I missed exactly what you said.
No, that's fine. So you also got started recently on something non-tech though, yes?
Yes, I had. My husband actually just started his own chiropractic company. So we're just getting started on that. So.
All right. Wonderful. Wonderful. Welcome all of you. Let's see. This is a very interesting discussion. So in my case, I happened to start something about 6 years ago. I was working with Box before that, other big companies, eBay and Microsofts of the world. And I'm at a different stage compared to where Jake is. It's been 6 years about, and Jake is about to get started. So we can talk about the entire spectrum, the entire journey as well. First question, Jake, what motivated you? Like, Apple must not have been bad at all. And like what sort of, you woke up in the morning one day and said, damn, like 5 years, let me just start my own thing. Is that how it happened?
No, it's definitely not how it happened. Yeah, that's a really good question. So to a certain extent, this is something I've just been inspired by, I don't know, since college. So when I first got my job at Apple, my perspective was almost that, I finally got, my free transport to the mothership, where people do this whole startup thing, right? And my goal was always to, try and figure out how to start my own company. But as it turns out, it's pretty difficult. It's difficult to line up an idea. It's difficult to line up a co-founder. So I, quietly, while I was at Apple, basically tried to do that. That was kind of how the gear started turning. And one of the downsides of big tech that a lot of people overlook is that at most of these tech companies, they own your brain. And what I mean by that is you sign an intellectual property agreement that basically says that anything you come up with, in the case of Apple, that it is related to Apple's current or demonstrated future business, belongs to Apple, right? And all the crap Apple works on, right? Like, that's basically any startup I could have possibly come up with. So I quietly, despite that, explored some ideas, and none of them turned out to be what I'm working on right now. But that was kind of what I was doing while I was at Apple. And eventually, I did find something that looked promising, and I found a co-founder that looked promising, and that's what led me to make the jump, which turned out to be really hard. It's not an easy decision to leave your job at Apple. And, I really had to kind of get a lot of things lined up to give me the courage to do that.
Very well said. Thank you, Jake. Appreciate that. And Pradeep, I didn't even see you, man. How are you?
Long time. I'm doing pretty well, man. Thanks a lot for inviting me.
Of course. Would you mind introducing yourself a little bit?
Sure. I'm Pradeep. I'm an engineer turned founder. I'm primarily a machine learning engineer with my background from a PhD in machine learning from Michigan, and then worked at Google for a while during my grad school, and then joined a small startup actually in Mountain View called Bloom Reach as an engineer, and that was about like 25 people, and left that about 4 years ago to start a company when we pivoted through a few different ways. And now I'm the co-founder of Souffle Club, and it's a new professional networking tool trying to disrupt LinkedIn.
Fascinating, Pradeep. Again, very, very good to see you, folks. Pradeep also used to teach for IK for a little while. Very, very, very good. Pradeep, what about your journey? Like, did you wake up in the morning one day and say, "Damn, let me just start a company"? Like, how did that happen for you? Like, Jake told his story. What is yours? Like, why even consider this?
I think my story was probably a little different in the sense that I joined right after my grad school a startup because I wanted to see what it would be like working at a startup. And I don't feel like I actually got any of that at Google when I interned through the years of my grad school. But even when I was at the early stage company, I was essentially hacking away at my own ideas like every weekend. And there was another person at Bloomreach that I would actually work on these ideas with. So there was always the idea that like I am going to start something at some point, and that was the reason why I joined a startup in the first place. And I think the only reason why I didn't start it sooner was because of visa issues. And once I got my visa issues sorted out, I decided to basically quit. I think I, in fact, quit probably like 2 months before I actually had my green card. But they were very supportive, and so I left it and then started the company.
Fascinating. Uh, Very interesting. So I'll tell you my story, and then I'm trying to find the common pieces between the three stories. So my story was actually quite similar, actually, in some ways to both of yours. Always wanted to start something, and um, got introduced to a problem many years ago, which did not leave my head for a long time. And it just got just as exacerbated as time went on. And at some point I realized that, damn, there has to be a better solution to this. And I quit and started this. So that's sort of the high level of this. And specifically the problem was of just interview preparation. um, my experience in 2001, actually year 2000 to be more precise, for Microsoft internship interviews, like, just left me quite jaded. It was a bizarre experience in the entire preparation process, um, the hiring process, the vagaries of that. I got in, but it was like a bewilderingly weird process. And figured there has to be that was sort of the first seed in my head in year 2000 to say, like, there has to be a better way to prepare. And come year 2014, and nobody had a better way of preparation. And so figured, think I always want to start something. I'm not a business person. This one looks like something that I can potentially do as an engineer. let's get going. um, that's that's the leap in my head, in my case. If I go back to your stories, Jake, and Pradeep, I think one thing that stands out to me as something that is common, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that all of us wanted to do it at some point. Like, there was an inbuilt desire somehow, somewhere, which is why, Pradeep, you joined a startup, which is why, Jake, you were constantly thinking about it. Um, and in my case as well, I think ever since I was 10, I wanted to start something, as well. So, is that right? Like, do people need something from the get go like that? Like, is this an inbuilt desire to just start something when you are a kid? Is this the one that manifests, and it's a prereq?
I mean, my perspective is I don't think it's necessarily a prereq. It was for me for whatever reason. I honestly haven't really reflected on that. It's kind of curious how this idea came into my mind. But I think another path that people sometimes take is they just discover a problem that really frustrates them. So maybe over the course of their job, working at their job, they notice, something missing in the world that they feel compelled to solve. Or it may be, more of a societal issue that they want to address. If it's like climate change or something like that, which may not be from an early age, but I guess a lot of people do, have it from early.
Yeah, I think a big portion of founders, probably that's true, that they start pretty early, or at least the itch to start something is pretty early. But like Jake said, I think there are definitely cases where they're more enamored by the problem, and they want to start something because they're so frustrated by the problem. Like, if you look at, I think founders of Snowflake, for example, I think they were in their 40s probably when they started. So clearly they weren't like looking all along to say that, like, I'm going to start something. Or even like the founders of Workday, for example, were much later as well.
Well, I suppose Workday story is slightly different, right? But no, I understand what you're saying. Workday stories, mean they came out of PeopleSoft, and they just wanted the whole thing online, right? So, but yeah, it wasn't that first rodeo. I'm guessing, like, this sort of implies first rodeo, I think, which actually is an interesting point to clarify. Big tech to leaving big tech to start a company. Very first, like, very first time in your career to start something, or the second or the third time? I think the thought process is different. I think today we are focusing more on the very first time phase. If it's your second time, third time, I think you know a whole lot of things and what not to do. But the first time is usually the hardest, and the one that takes the most toll on your decision making process. Um, the But it is quite interesting, really, that despite the visa challenges, like, you were certain you wanted to start. I mean, you didn't see that as a thing in your way. You didn't see that visa challenge was an issue in a way, and you just and the moment you got closer to solving it, you just jumped. That needs another level of courage, man.
I mean, I think I was a little lucky in that, like, I had a PhD, so my green card process went quicker than normally it would have. And as a result of that, I always knew that I was going to basically get my green card sooner than later. So yeah, I wasn't really thinking about like the visa as a problem. Even if in case I didn't get it, I still probably would have figured out a way to start it by getting an O1. There seems to be like tons of loopholes about how you can go about solving visa issues as well. And I have like a few friends who've gone through that process and still managed to start. So I think if you truly want to start, I think it's solvable.
Fascinating. Makes sense. Yeah, I've never looked into it in detail, but you touched upon something very interesting again. You felt like you got a bit lucky because you had a PhD and your visa process went fast. Um, have I also realized that luck has played a big role in sort of my starting up as well, and such. For example, I came out of box, and some bit of financial stability was very important in my life for this to happen. My wife was also super supportive in getting me started, like taking care of the kids and the house and everything else. So I absolutely did get lucky in those aspects. Otherwise, there was no humanly possible way to do this. What other aspects you feel like you guys got lucky, Jake? In being able to take the plunge, feels like it's a central part of starting up.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think a lot of the luck came in having, I guess, financial stability, which gave me the courage to be able to do this. You know, I had worked at Apple for 5 years, and you know, fortunately, Apple stock has done pretty well. So I was able to, you know, crunch the numbers and say, okay, you know, one of the things, if you ever read like Tim Ferriss, The 4-Hour Work Week, it's a bit of a controversial book, but one of the things he says in the book that I think is great is to vividly imagine the worst case scenario. You know, like if you're on the fence about a decision, think about what's the worst thing that could possibly happen. And most often, like, that it's not going to be as bad as you think. And for me, you know, in that case, it was like, okay, if I quit my job, I've got enough money to last a couple of years. Like, worst case, you know, I'll probably end up just back in big tech and a few years behind. So that was part of it for me. You know, if I just tried to do this straight out of school, I didn't have the financial resources at that time, and so I probably would have not had the courage to take such a big risk. That was definitely part of it for me.
Fascinating. Pradeep, financial stability played a part in your decision making also, just like it did in mine and Jake's.
To some degree, yes. I think I'd worked at the startup for like about 5 years, and it was an early stage startup, so probably not as good as what I would have done if I had been at Google or something. But it was enough to the point where I didn't feel like, oh, I'm going to feel the pinch. And I've always looked at it as it's like when you know that like you can essentially go back to big tech. I think we're all in a very fortunate place to say that. If that is your backup offer, saying that like, oh, I could always go back and make enough money to be leading a comfortable life. If that's your backup offer, I think you owe it yourself, in fact, to start something. Try it, because what's the worst that can happen? You're going to basically lose 2 or 3 years of your life trying to figure out if you think that like startup is truly what you want to do, then there's no harm in trying it. It gives you so much more freedom if big tech is, if you're fortunate enough to basically say that I can go back to big tech.
Yeah, loaded observation, you know, and obviously I love it, right? and so feel free to start companies, and we'll put you back into big tech through interview kickstart. So pretty sure of that. Pretty sure of that. Um, there are vehicles now where you can say, you know what, like, let me take 2 3 5 years of my life and try this, and if not, fine, you kickstart, just get into good place back again. um or even without interview kickstart, like your own. But actually, very important thing to touch, both Jake and you, that this is big tech to start a founding, right? And so financial stability has played an interesting role in Jake's case. 5 years at Apple gave him a little bit, and then in your case, your confidence of being able to get back. In Jake's case as well, of that, or my case as well, that was the case. Um, so before and after big tech, like some sort of a some sort of a stability equation, right? First financial, and then afterwards the confidence of being able to go back to it. It seems to have played a big role, actually. And Pradeep, to your point, like when you have that kind of cushion from both sides, like, why not take the risk, right? Why not try and imagine the world the way you wanted it, and try and sort of make it that way? That's an excellent point. The um uh both
One thing,
Yeah,
sorry,
so
one
go
thing
ahead.
that I would add probably there is, if I was younger, I might have been even more cavalier to say that, like, I don't even need the financial stability. If in case you can raise even like a small round of funding, I don't know, when you're like 22, I probably didn't need as much money. Like, if I could just pay rent and make enough for my food, then I would have
Yeah,
probably been fine. So if you're younger, that also helps you in starting. You could basically make bigger bets then.
makes sense. No, that isn't so. Let me come back to a very interesting question right after this. But folks, just refreshing the room. My name is Soham. I'm the founder of Interview Kickstart. I'm talking with Jake, Pradeep, Steph, and Prasid about the journey from big tech to start being a startup founder. Um, and Jake worked at Apple for a few years, and then he got started. Pradeep worked at Google and Bloomreach for a few years, and then he got started. And we examined our stories of getting started, mine, Jake's, and Pradeep's, and we realized that in our case, at least, there was an inbuilt desire to just start something while we were in college, even before that. Though that is not really required. I mean, we have all seen cases where people didn't want to start, but later in life they were like, no, let's get started. So it's not a required thing. The other observation we made was that we all got lucky in some ways that we were associated with big tech. So a little bit of financial stability came in before we got started, and a little bit of financial stability, and a little bit of assurance came in as well, because we knew that we had been into big tech once, and so we could go back to it. And Pradeep made the point that when you have that kind of thing, then why not take the risk, right? Why not imagine the world the way you want it to be, and go after it? Excellent point. And folks, I'd love to take questions in a few minutes. So if you have questions, please do raise your hand, and we'll bring you up in the order it was raised, and then we'll chat. Pradeep also made a point that don't let the visa issues get in your way. That there seem to be a few loopholes as well. Got different ways of starting companies, and don't feel bad about exploiting them as loopholes. About 40% of Fortune 500 are started by immigrants or second generation immigrants. So it is a good thing overall. The next question I have, folks, is this. Um, the big tech, the comp is insanely high, right? These days, like, I'm hard pressed to find an offer that is less than like 250, 275, 300K a year, which is massive, considering vast majority of America barely saves a couple hundred grand for the retirement, and here we are making that like twice of that, or at least 50% more every freaking year, for solving some algorithmic questions. But the so that is a massive opportunity cost, no? Like, I used to worry about it at some point, to say, if I take a detour from my big tech life for 3 years, 5 years, right, and I would like do this back of the envelope calculations. Look, I'm being paid so much now, and then the next year my comp is going to increase. In 5 years, I'm going to lose so much money. What if this thing doesn't work out? And then sort of people just laugh at me and say, "So this was a stupid idea. You were there already. You wasted 5 years of your life, and you came back for nothing." Like that rabbit hole thinking. I remember I used to do as well. Did you guys do that? Did you guys have those feelings? Like, how did you get over it if you had them?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the statistics, it's really not a statistically wise thing to do. This whole like quit your big tech job and start a startup. I mean, the vast majority of these startups fail, and if you look at the opportunity cost, like you said, on average, you would make far more in big tech than you would, starting a startup. So I don't think that's the perspective that you would want to take, to motivate yourself to do this. It's something that I thought about, but I guess for me, it just comes down to like, what do you want to do? For me, I was happy at Apple for a while, but it got to a point where, I was like, this is not what I want to do with the rest of my life. I don't want to, I don't see myself just moving up. And a lot of these big tech companies, you have to basically, give your life to the company if you want to move up. You know what I mean? And for me, I was like, I would rather give my life to a cause that I care about, or at least to something that's gonna give me potentially a greater reward in the long run. I was definitely after flexibility, but yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's sort of a thing like you're the whole point is to take a chance, and the odds are going to be against you. So that's just something you have to, I guess, you have to some extent be overconfident in yourself that you're going to do better than most people do. Otherwise, it doesn't make sense.
Fascinating. Pradeep?
Yeah, I think that makes perfect sense. Every entrepreneur, in fact, I feel in the Valley at least, have definitely gone through this stage where they're comparing their opportunity cost to what they're doing right now, and trying to reevaluate and second guess themselves. So I've done that too. And I think I probably did this fairly early on as well. And I made a lot of dumb choices. Like, well, I don't know about dumb. For example, one, I chose to do my PhD over taking up a job at Facebook in like end of 2007. Should have probably done that. And that probably was like a much bigger opportunity because now in hindsight. So one, it's hindsight. And two, you're, like Jake said, you're statistically always more likely to make money if is what's going to drive you. Then you should probably take a job at big tech. Big tech has a ton of interesting problems too, by the way. I have nothing against like people working at big tech. I have tons of friends who work there. The only thing is I don't see them being happier or sadder than like me right now, making a ton more money though. So I don't think this hedonic treadmill, once you get on it, it ever stops. So if you think money does play an important factor, that's perfectly fine. Take up a job in big tech and you can be happy as well. Or if in case you think that like, well, the problem seems to be very interesting and I think I would enjoy doing a startup, try that as well. So yeah, just make sure that like you're very clear about what it is that you're starting a company for, and also come to terms with the fact that like statistically you're not as likely to make money. So hopefully there is something other than money that drives you when you're doing your startup.
Hopefully something other than money. Both Jake and Pradeep. Yes, that is actually very, very, very right. And I personally also can't see any other way of doing this. I think irrationally just trusting yourself to say that I'll either make it work, or even if I can't make it work, it'll still be worthwhile. I'll take a perspective that it is worthwhile. I will not listen to the world when the world says that you should have done something else, because the world is going to say that anyway, no matter what. If you go this way or that way, there will always be enough people who said, so you are financially stable. Why didn't you take the risk? Right. And there'll always be people on the other side who would say, you were financially stable. Why take the risk? And so there are different perspectives in the world, and you're not what do you call you don't need to succumb to any of them. You just have to take your own path. And so the other explanation to this, which I've heard from one of our advisors, is that so if you have to ask, right, whether I should start a company or not, right, then you should not be starting a company. It's a bit of an extreme perspective, but there is some truth to that, in that kind of thinking. The the act of starting is by far the hardest act that one can do in that journey. And once you get started, there is a whole bunch of mundane things, a series of mundane things that you have to put up with, one thing after the other. And you have to have the courage to continue to just be with it for years together. Something like that doesn't happen if you keep looking at just money all the time. It is money at best is deferred gratification, and in many cases just doesn't happen either. Like in my case, for example, like 10 years of running an Kickstart in 10 years at big tech with just getting promoted at normal rates. Pretty easily I would have made more at big tech. In fact, our highest offer today, which happened just a couple of weeks ago, was $930K a year, right? Like and an L7, a senior manager kind of offer, which I was at, not that number, but I was at like at that title even before I started. So generally speaking, if I go back and do the math today, it looks hideous in terms of monetary compensation. The path that I've chosen is completely stupid. And it's overly stupid in my case because the students that we train actually go get better offers and such. But again, like if I dwell on that all the time, then there is no humanly possible way to do anything. And in my case, at least, like I didn't see a choice. Like it was just like, I'm 35, I have to start. Like I wanted to start for a long time. The circumstances are perfect. Forget about the money, just to get it going. And to Pradeep's point earlier, like if you are younger than that, just like there is no reason otherwise. So, but there is guys, there is something to be said about seeing the world in a certain way, right? Like you just can't stop yourself from starting something. You can't stop yourself from trying to solve a certain problem in the world. Is that not true, Jake, Pradeep? Like you just see the world in a way where there are problems and certain problems, and you're like, why isn't there a solution to this damn thing? Right? Like, isn't that sort of the biggest thing that gets you over this fear of money?
I'm trying to think. To a certain extent, it was. Yeah. I mean, for me, I guess I just wanted. I believed that I could get a better life for myself. You know, if I built my own thing. Remains to be seen whether that's true, but I still believe that. Yeah, you know, if you start a startup, and I think one of the things that a lot of people think is that, you know, if you start a startup, you have to like risk it all to build the next unicorn, and it's going to be $1 billion company, and that's not necessarily the case either. So I guess this is a bit of a tangent, but another thing that I think got me over the hump is I'm personally okay if I started a business that even made me less money than I was making at Apple, but you know, if it worked as like passive income or something like that, that's a life that I think I'd be happier with, you know, than you know, making more money at big tech, but being restricted. You know, like I said, intellectual property agreement, you have to live in Silicon Valley. There's a lot of restrictions in big tech, so that's another benefit. Is they call that a lifestyle business. If you start a business that's not necessarily, you know, venture backed and you're big, you know, it can also be good for you as well.
Makes sense. Pradeep, what do you think?
Yeah, I actually, the original business that I started ended up being a bootstrapped, what people might call a lifestyle business, where we were essentially helping engineers get jobs at startups by pre-vetting them. And that grew pretty quickly. So we actually got to making about like 700K annualized revenue within like 9 months of starting it. We could have continued doing that, and that was just me and my co-founder. We had taken no venture money. The only thing is I didn't see that as in any way scaling to the point where it would be like a venture backable thing. And again, this is where I went back to saying that, like, well, not in this for just making money, but I want to see if in case, and the reason why I cared so much about it being venture scale was more as a corollary of impact. So if I could basically take the risk right now, I might as well take a shot and swing for the fences rather than basically building a very cushy, comfortable life.
Fascinating. Both of you actually touched on something interesting in the process. So venture scale, right, versus a lifestyle business. Sorry, Pradeep, you were saying something?
No, I was just laughing. Yeah, go ahead.
No, venture scale versus lifestyle business. Now, that is true. Though I must say, I mean, we are not a venture scale business. Like, Kickstarter is not a venture scale business, but and I've heard that a lot as well. I think it's a topic and discussion on its own. And my sense is that venture scale, like if you think a lot too much about, am I going to build a venture scale business or am I going to build a lifestyle business when I get started, I think you probably never get started. I think some of those things and some of those learnings happen after you just quit your job and you take the plunge into just anything, and then you learn, right? Like even in entrepreneurship, just like there is a ladder in software engineering, right? There's a software engineer, then there's a software engineer 2, and then there's a senior software engineer, and like staff and senior staff and principal and senior principal and distinguished and fellows and senior fellows and stuff like that. There is a ladder in entrepreneurship as well. Like you have to start from scratch when you are doing it for the first time. At that point of time, lifestyle versus venture, I don't know, that seems like a distracting question to me. And once you keep growing in that ladder of entrepreneurship is when I think those questions make slightly more sense. And Pradeep, I'm sure in your case it made a lot of sense once you were at that kind of revenue at your earlier business. The but when you're starting out, like don't worry about it. Would be my 2 cents. No.
I'll say, like, I definitely agree with that, because I didn't quit my job with either in mind. I wasn't saying like, oh, I'm only going to do a lifestyle business, or oh, I'm only going to do a venture business. I think if you need venture funding, you're limited, because then you can only start a venture business. But for me, the types of ideas I'm looking at, some of them, it's like, okay, this could potentially grow into something venture backed, or it could not. The only difference for me is that my preference was to bootstrap. And like you said, that's a whole other discussion topic in itself. And, seek venture funding later once the business grows larger. But yeah, I don't think you necessarily need to choose before you take the leap.
I think I'm kind of conflicted on this one. On one hand, like I definitely don't think that there's anything wrong with starting either types of businesses. But I do think it is useful to spend some time early on thinking about what kind of business you want to build. And that changes a lot about the fundamentals that you want to have, like, deeply set with about your business. And that changes on a day-to-day basis how you think about it, how you work on it, etc. as well. So I do think that these are very different kinds of businesses, and as a result, they require very different kinds of teams that you build, like the kinds of people that you want to surround yourself with. Everything is different. So I would say it's probably useful to at least spend some time thinking about it as to what it is that you want to do. By the way, I did not do this, so I think it's a good idea to do it, but I clearly didn't do it. But I think if I had to do it again, I would definitely spend a lot of time thinking about what kind of business I want to start first, and then dive in.
Fascinating. That's something, Pradeep, I think you and I will have to possibly disagree on permanently, because I feel like something like that would lead to analysis paralysis. And it's like one more decision to make before just taking the plunge. But you're right. I think you will have to figure that out at some point. So one could also take the view that earlier the better. Very interesting. Yeah,
I still stand by it that like Interview Kickstart could very well be a venture scale business, and I still think it should become. And I'll let you basically deal with it.
Thank you for that vote of confidence. You should probably talk to my wife, but about it. But okay. Um, Fascinating. The and before we go to Anil, and sorry, I don't know how to read Chinese. Not sure what your name is. We go to take questions, but another thought here, which I think is also possibly humming in people's heads, is venture funding. Right, like many engineers, especially and other people as well, like they are worried that they will not get funding when they get started. Do you always need funding? I think it's related to lifestyle versus not. Do you always need funding? Like, is it very, very difficult to get funding? Like, should that be a reason to not get off the ground and say, yeah, I'm making like $500,000 at big tech. Why do I do this or that? Like, should funding be a deterrent before you get started?
So this is something that surprised me. I didn't realize right now it's actually extremely easy to get funding. And I'm in a networking group called On Deck. That's pretty cool. If any of you guys want to start companies, you should all check out On Deck. But the general consensus from people doing that is like, yeah, it's not difficult to get funding if you need it and if you have a good business idea. So I wouldn't necessarily be worried about that. But also, if you talk to some people, they'll hold the perspective that getting funding too early is something that'll actually hurt you. And if you bootstrap, which is basically bootstrapping is the term for starting a business without funding, where you just use your proceeds with some small initial investment to slowly grow the business. If you can bootstrap, and there's some businesses like you can never bootstrap Uber, they just need too much money. But if you can bootstrap your business, one, you don't have to give away more of your company to investors, which is great. And two, it's like, you'll know early on whether your business is working or not, because, you're growing it based on money people are actually giving you and not, customers are giving you, not investors. So that's another option. If you can bootstrap, you don't need funding to do it. Just whatever little amount of funding you have, especially for software, you'd be surprised what you can build.
Fascinating. Yes, you would always be surprised with what you can build. It is pretty cheap to start companies these days. So, and coming from big tech, you have a little bit of cushion. Plus, I think Jake, big tech also gives you a bit of halo, such that funding actually becomes easier compared to someone who's not coming from big tech. So,
yeah, if you're coming from big tech, for sure.
Yeah, Pradeep.
Yeah, that's definitely true. Like, I think big tech plays a big halo effect. Unfortunately, Valley still survives based on brands. So if you have enough brands on your resume, then it definitely helps a ton. That being said, I don't think funding should be a deterrent to starting, where I think you can always test an idea. And the reason why I generally suggest my friends to at least try starting something before going to raise funding is not because it's hard or easy to get funding, but more so, I think you need to build enough conviction in the idea yourself that I want to spend at least the next 5 years doing this before you go and raise money. Because once you raise money, you're on the treadmill and you have to basically constantly keep raising funding. And it's fine to do that, but you need to make sure that like you're starting the right kind of business. You have the perseverance to basically stick with it no matter how many ups and downs you see. So just to see that, try building something where you have enough conviction and you'll basically understand enough things about how much to raise, who to raise from, like what kind of help would I basically need? Is this going to be like an engineering focused thing, or is this actually going to be a distribution focused thing? No matter what it is, you'll get a ton more of clarity in terms of what kind of business you want to start, how much money you should raise. So definitely start something. And it's like you mentioned, I think it's pretty easy to start something even on the side. So do enough to build enough conviction and then go raise money, as opposed to raising money and then trying to see, well, let's see what we can work on.
Fascinating. That is true. In fact, I would attest to the fact it is much easier today to raise funding with all the money floating around in the economy. There's a lot of money floating around in the economy, and in fact, this is the first time I'm seeing ads run by venture firms. Like my Twitter feed has ads by different firms to say, raise from us kind of thing. It's certainly easier now than it was ever before. And again, just circling back to the point both Jake and Pradeep made, is that if you have the big tech halo, it is a magnitude easier to raise funding as well. So spending even a year or two at a tier one company, like changes your life in ways which sort of make things many things very easy and open many more doors for you. Fascinating. Okay, let's I have many more questions, but I think let's take questions from Anil. Did you have a question?
Yeah, thanks guys for sharing all your experiences. It's great.
Of course.
So I got a two-part question. One question is, when you are working for a big tech and you are also thinking about, okay, I'm going to start a startup, and you're thinking about it, and then you're also tinkering with it. A lot of thought process happens before you quit your job and say, hey, I'm going to do it. What does that transition feel like? What are some of the convictions that you feel within yourself before you say, okay, I'm in? There has to be a moment where you make that decision and you jump into it. What does that transition feel like? And then in hindsight, what would you say yourself? Saying, oh, okay, maybe I should have done this sooner or earlier. What are some of those things that you would say yourself before you started your startup?
Yeah, so first of all, no problem. Yeah, happy to share. One thing I would say, like, if I could do it differently, I might have left sooner. I was honestly surprised how easy it was to like find consulting and other work after I left my job. One of the things that happens when you are in big tech is, you're surrounded by a lot of really smart people. So, I would pretty much, as far as software engineering competency goes, compare myself against my peers. And after leaving Apple, I found, you're almost more valuable having left Apple than within Apple, right? Because now it's like, oh, here's an Apple engineer that I can hire to do stuff. And, there's no like overhead of like getting me equipped for the job before that. So knowing that, I might have left sooner. I mentioned, like I said, I spent a fair amount of time like prototyping an idea, which like I really wasn't supposed to do while I was at Apple, but that I'm not even working on that idea anymore anyways. So, I guess what are they going to do? Go after me over an idea that's, not even a business. But I was prototyping the idea, and that's what it took for me. That's what the process looked like, is basically, first of all, you need to come up with an idea, you need to find a co-founder, and then before you build anything, I would highly recommend you validate the idea. So try to talk to customers, and if you can, get someone to, give you money in the best case, just to make sure that the business that you're starting is actually going to work. And then I would say once you've validated your idea, that's probably the earliest point where I would say, okay, go ahead and leave big tech. That's where, you've got a solid business. For me, it took longer. I actually started building it. And then it was pretty much once I felt like I got a decent head start and we were like close-ish to being able to launch, which I wasn't going to do publicly while I was at Apple. That was when I made the jump. That's what it looked like for me. But yeah, if I could do it again, I might have done it sooner. That's one takeaway.
Thank you.
Fascinating. Pradeep?
Yeah, I don't think there's a one-size-fits-all answer for this. For example, in my case, it was essentially the visa issues which were stopping me from starting sooner. But I was essentially also prototyping ideas and trying out different ideas over the weekends. So I would still say that like when you're in big tech or already working for any company, in fact, just make sure to try all your ideas. And so that when you leave, you have enough conviction to go full steam ahead, as opposed to leave it and then try that, because you'll invariably hit some blockers. And it's useful to have that early momentum to carry you through some lows at least.
Thank you.
That is very interesting. I think from my side, I got started in 2014. The world is different today. If you were to start today, what are some things you would do before? I would look at your network, right, and say, with this network that I have, LinkedIn network, Facebook network, Twitter network, just friends network, family, neighbors, wherever. In general, characterize your network and then ask the question, with this network, what can I start? Instead of the other way around. Like you might want to start a greenhouse automation company or something, but like if nobody in your network does greenhouses, it's going to be very difficult for you to find connections and get off the ground. If you want to make it any easier on you, that is, I mean, that's also an option. Like it's not mandatory to make it easier on yourself, but if you want to make it any easier on you, start something that fits with your network. In other words, and Jake could attest to this, given his on deck. Like build a community first. Right? Today the world is such that if you build a community first and then get off the ground from the community, it is much easier. It's much easier to validate. Also, to what Pradeep said, if you have a community, right? I use the word network and community in this answer fairly interchangeably, but if you have a network, it's easier to build a community as well. So if you could build something on the side, try building a community first, and then get off the ground from that. And Steph, that applies to you also, as your husband is starting even on a chiropractic business. If you could build a community of people who might need that, I think you will have a much easier time doing so. The other than that, really, it's the desire to see the world in a certain way, and that the strength of that desire will determine whether you will take the leap or not, and whether you will continue with perseverance, like Pradeep said earlier, or not. I would not recommend doing like a whole bunch of things on the side and saying that only if something takes off, I will go start something. Like that will never happen. Most cases it doesn't happen. You just have to be miraculously lucky for it to happen. Like one has to give full mind share to an idea to give it the right shot. Like if you fall in the trap of hedging your bets like that, it's going to be very slow. Even if the idea is good, your execution is going to be slow, and somebody else is going to come and take it away if the idea is good. So take it away, because they will be at it full time and they'll do it faster. So to your point, like the transition feels relieving. Actually, it feels like a relief when you want to see the world in a certain way and you now took the leap to do so. It doesn't feel overtly stressful. It should feel relieving, and that is one good sign that you're probably on the right track, and this is the right decision, at least for the short term. So it should feel relieving to answer that question. And to answer the question of what should you be doing before, if you can, then try and build a network around what you want to do. Right? You see the world in a certain way. There are certain aspects to it which you feel like should exist. They don't exist. Build a network around that, and then build a community after you quit. Right? Even before, it's fine, and then get started. So hope that answers and summarize. I think Jake and Pradeep obviously are more recent into this. Well, Pradeep about the same. He's been doing multiple things.
Thanks, Soham. Thanks very much.
Of course. And Jerry, do you have
Hey, Soham, thank you for inviting me up here, and thank you, Stephanie, for the same. Soham, I was just in my mind's eye, I was still seeing that picture that Stephanie was showing, the video that Stephanie was showing, where you had that longer, rocker hair. So when I come on Clubhouse and I see you have that clean cut, I was like, okay, that's Soham too. But thank you very much for inviting me up here. And I'm just listening to all this stuff. I'm processing. My question is also two parts. One of it is kind of a variation on what Anil asked, and it's kind of like this. What have you learned about yourself as founder that you would not have necessarily found out about yourself if you just stayed an employee? Like maybe you would have, but like what would you say is one thing you found out about yourself that only being a founder kind of allowed you that distance to say, wow, and so the part that's related to this is, what have you found out about something other than yourself? Meaning, what have you learned about the world, the society, customers, or anything else that you don't think you would have found out unless you became a founder? And then the second question is kind of like related to something Jake said earlier at the top of the hour, and it really struck me, right? So Jake mentioned, one of the things that was causing him to consider, I mean, he has a cushy job at Apple, but Apple owns your brain. And I think a lot of these companies, they have that thing where they say anything you invent, or they don't even call it invent. You came up with it during company time. I've got first dibs. And so the question to this is, well, now as founders, how do you folks strike that proper balance where you want to kind of have ownership over what's being created for your company, but then you also maybe don't want to, you want to retain your top talent too. Like otherwise every Jake is just going to go start up their own shop. So how do you strike that proper balance? My name is Jerry and I'm complete for now. Thank you.
Thanks, Jerry. Very insightful question. Obviously a whole another topic in itself, but Jake, do you want to go?
Yeah, sure. So that first one is tough. What have I learned about myself? What have I learned about the world? So through my journey so far, one of the things that happens, I guess, is you're no longer just an engineer writing code. You're now doing sales and marketing, and you're also, managing your relationships with your co-founders and whatnot. So it definitely tests your people skills. And for a lot of us, as engineers, we're more of the introverted type, and we're less of the might potentially be more of the logical type and less of the emotionally intelligent type. And so that's something you really have to be careful of. Once you turn into a leader, and once you put yourself into high stress situations, is you really have to make an extra effort, especially if you're, the typical introverted engineer, to try to really empathize with other people. If you're going through struggles, and also to challenge yourself if you're doing sales, which in the early stages will be customer interviews. You have to challenge yourself through that as well. So I struggled with both of those a little bit. So that was definitely something I learned about myself. Something I learned about the world. I don't know. Like I said, I was surprised how easy it is to raise money. That was kind of a cool thing. I had no intention of doing that. I still am not eager to do that, but I'm glad I could if I wanted to. And I don't know. I guess I learned that lawyers may not necessarily want a smart pen app. At this point in the technology evolution. So I kind of discovered that my product idea was potentially invalid.
Fascinating. Pradeep?
I think this might sound like a douchey answer, but it was essentially humility. I feel like I was a little too arrogant probably when I started the company. As an engineer, I was like, I can probably build products. I can do anything I wanted. But trying to build something that people want is incredibly hard. And to get it in the hands of enough people and to make sure that they continue to use it, make sure that you have retention, it's an incredibly hard problem. And you also start to see the sheer number of things that you need to be good at in order for all of this to work together. And on top of that, there is luck, and there's the sheer magnitude of how many things need to come together and timing. It's insane, and that basically humbles you. I don't think anything has humbled me as much as a startup has.
Touche, man. Touche. That is actually correct. My side, Jake. I was obviously like Jake and Pradeep. I'm a different being, and I see the world differently. I was a very introverted person, and I still am. And I just was not confident when I got started. Right. I just wanted to solve the problem. The one big thing I learned about myself was that it is possible to stand on my own. Right. In my previous lives, I was making somebody else's vision successful, right? And that was certainly fun. Learned a lot. Got me the brand. Got me the money. All of that. But that also kept me with a feeling that maybe I'll never be able to stand on my own, and just provide for myself and the family just by who I am and the way I see it. and that was a lingering feeling ever since, which actually got shattered once the business got off the ground, and I realized, no, I can actually, like, I can survive on my own. That feeling is extremely liberating as well. um and I'll never forget that time when I realized that, no, this thing actually pays, that I can survive and sustain my family. So that I had it in myself, right, was the revelation once I started, and once I got in, and once it like, even some revenue started to come. um so that is one. The other thing about the world that I realized is that, and I mentioned that a bit earlier. um Starting up, to Pradeep's point, Jake's point, it's yeah, it almost feels like miracle for something to work. But what leads to that miracle is just a series of mundane things, right, that just have to come together. So your time as a startup founder is is not in magical things. The magical stuff is the output. The input is just a series of mundane looking things. To pick up any of the things that I've done in the past 6 years, by itself, it is extremely mundane, simple, stupid, right, to do, but vast majority of them. um, and and you just have to put up with that, right? And if you come from an intellectual background, surrounded by cerebral people on the planet, and you always feel like you're doing challenging things and you do challenging stuff, but founding is actually the opposite, to in my worldview. Like, you just have to do mundane things. You have to pick up the damn phone at that damn time, right, and call, right, and in whatever state of mind you are in, you have to pitch, like, and that's a mundane thing to just do by itself, nothing magical, right? But when you do that 2,000 times, like I had done, right, then it results into some sort of magic, right? And so like, it's starting up and doing things is actually quite mundane. That is why you see people from all walks of life doing it, right? You don't need a big tech background to do this. A big tech makes it easier, but you don't need a big tech background. There are people with or without education who do this, and people with more than big tech and education who do this as well. So there isn't as much of a correlation to starting up and having whatever background. You just have to put up with a whole bunch of mundane things in a series to do. So that's what I've learned, to a point.
Something else I can chime in on. The
Please.
third part of the question was, if you hate the intellectual property agreements so much, what are you going to do in your own startup? And like, funny enough, I'm also an instructor here at Interview Kickstart, and Soham made me sign the same exact kind of intellectual property agreement, right? But the thing that's different is, like, ultimately, the more I've thought about this, I think it's just an unfortunate reality of starting companies and employing people is these type of agreements need to exist. Otherwise, as a founder, you're at risk. You have to protect at least the intellectual property of the company, right? But I think the reason that they especially suck in big tech is not because the agreements exist. I think they need to exist. It's just because of how much these companies do. So, the agreement that I signed when I joined Interview Kickstart was basically like, I'm not going to, start my own competing, Interview Kickstart and steal their curriculum, right? Which that doesn't stop me from starting a startup. And I think in the case of my own startup, I probably have a similar agreement. But, if my employees wanted to found a company in a different space, they'd still be able to do so. So I wouldn't be as concerned about it.
Yes, good point, Jake. I absolutely wouldn't be as concerned about these non-compete things at big tech. Those clauses exist, like Jake said, they exist in our agreement as well, and practically every company's. The clauses exist to protect the extremes, right? If somebody went and stole the curriculum, stole the methods, stole this, that, the other thing, and started out, I need a way to just go after them if that happens, right? But you working for Interview Kickstart operations, you start a chiropractic company like Steph did, right? I would love it. I would encourage it. It's nothing that I would go after, right, for it. So, and that's exactly how big tech companies think as well. If you know this case of Anthony Lewandowski, who stole stuff from Google's self-driving business all to Uber. and sold it to Uber in different ways. Like those are the kinds of situations that they want to prevent. But other than that, they don't really bother. It's just not worth the time. Like even today, I know that there are some instructors who like do one-on-one coaching on the side. Is it worth my time to just pursue them and say, hey, you shouldn't be coaching that one student that you do every week or whatnot? No, it's not. It's just not. I understand that and such. And so that's it's certainly not Amazon. What's Amazon's time? What's Google's time? What's Facebook's time to sort of come after sort of little things like that? Even if there is some overlap, it's not worth their time. Be careful in doing something which is directly competing. For sure, be careful in like stealing stuff like Anthony did. Like those things, yes, they will come after you. But otherwise, I would absolutely not worry about it. Like, yes, I mean, the agreement also says that you shouldn't use their computer and stuff like that. But do you really think they care and such as much? Yeah, sometimes the policies are strict and they don't let you open some kind of software, this, that, the other thing. So it's annoying to be doing any of development on company's computer, but it's not overall not worth their time for little things like that. So yeah, I that's one thing I wouldn't worry about before starting. So to Jake's point as well. So
Yeah, it's only like worth it when real money's involved, right? So
yes, and a lot. Like for big companies, like 10 million, 20 million is also not what they're going after. They need markets, and like the self-driving cars, are multi-billion-dollar markets. And then somebody is stealing their secrets in that, yes, they will go after it. In a very public way, they will go after it. But otherwise, meh, doesn't matter.
Yeah. At Apple, there was actually an employee in the like chips division who like literally at work was saying, I'm going to take this idea that I came up with just now at work and start a competing business. And then Apple's going to have to buy it. And, he was saying this at work, and then he did it. And then Apple sued the crap out of him because, like, so I think but that's the only case I've heard of like that sort of thing being enforced.
Yeah, but yeah, that's like borderline stupid to say that, like loud and stuff like that. But yeah, absolutely. I mean, and yeah. And there have been instances where people have very cleanly left companies, started their own, and come back and pitched, and the companies have bought those small ones, right? And that's a very legit pathway, very, very legit pathway. Cisco is known to do this. But there are several people at Cisco, for example, who would quit Cisco. They would know what problem exists at Cisco. They would solve it faster, better than Cisco's environment could. And then Cisco would gladly buy that because otherwise they couldn't have solved it in that time. Right? So, and Cisco, in fact, actually Cisco does it in an official way as well. Like they have more than once they have found teams of people to and they've put them on ideas and said, here is a new company, you guys go run it, here is the seed funding, and when you exit, this is going to be the exit multiple in this time, just execute towards it and I'll buy you back. Like stuff like that, companies have done as well. Anyway, but so yes, long story short, yes, I wouldn't worry about the non-competes very much unless like it's something blatant. So just don't do anything blatant. So awesome, folks. So if there are no more questions, looks like there aren't. Thank you very much for everybody's time. This was a lot of fun. I hope people gain something out of it. And yeah, thank you, Jake. Thank you, Pradeep. Prasad, staff, Anil, Jared, thank you for all of your time. A very good, stimulating discussion. And if we can be of any help, don't hesitate to reach out to any of us.
Thank you, Soham.
Sure.
Thank you, Soham.
Thanks all for your time. Okay. Thanks. Bye,
Thanks, man.
bye, guys. Bye, everybody.
See ya.
Good night.
Good night.